Yeah. What's up? How y'all doing, man? Y'all miss us? Ma'am? All right, listen up. Make like a challenge and chop chop. 20 years ago, that was cool. It may not be cool no more. I don't know, man. How you doing? Y'all miss us? I know you're here. I can see that. Uh-oh. What's the real truth?
I knew y'all was coming. I was like, I knew y'all.
We not. It,
I was like, if they come, then I know they.
Why wouldn't we come?
Because you know what? Because it was a storm on there, y'all.
We call it what?
It was a storm.
Oh, the rain, man. Come on, man. If we were doing drugs, we'd be out in the rain looking for it. I know. Marshall can't come. His wife won't let him out in the rain like this, man. Yeah. My wife probably don't know how dangerous it is, so. Yeah. Well, yeah, one thing about recovery, though, we suit up and show up. I mean, when we were out there ripping and running, ain't nothing stopped us, so. Yeah. So y'all miss us? Are y'all learn anything? Oh, y'all got them on the tablets now. I'll have to do it. How y'all like, what's that guy named Travis? Hollywood Travis? I hear he's getting good. That's what I hear. And I'm thinking, what has happened to the sense of humor of youth of America, man? I mean, yeah, y'all get the paper and everything. I'll have to start writing more articles. Maybe you can see more.
I've seen you in it 2 or 3 times. So every time they mention anything about opioids or the
I'm an outspoken critic. Yeah, I still, you know, the good news is a lot of money going to go to a lot of places, a lot of jobs, a lot of things, you know. But bad news is they didn't ask me exactly how to use it and get the maximum outcome for the input of the funds, which I think if anybody in America knows how to put it to the best use, I'm the guy. Now, that might sound arrogant, but it's just the truth, man. Anyways, I'll work on that technique later on how I can get them to listen to me more. Because they sure don't like the way I approach them now and try to give them quality information. How many of y'all think y'all could run a jail better than what you're seeing? We all think we experts. You know, you spend a little time doing something, all of a sudden, man, we got better answers. But until you start doing the work, it ain't that easy, you know. It's hard to run organizations. It's hard to run funding flows. It's hard to, especially our population. We are the second most difficult population on earth to not only try to manage, but influence in a positive direction. And the worst would be, you know, the most severe mentally ill population, you know. God bless the people who work with those folks, man. Whatever they make, it ain't enough. But anyway, we're glad to be here. You know us, we suit up, we show up. You know, and don't get me wrong, this sometimes is a highlight of my week to come up in here and share some experience, strength, and hope. But it really is, believe it or not. I was trying to explain in group the other day, you know, a lot of things we can be doing in life, but the value of being able to be in position to share your experience, strength, and hope that you can stop using drugs, lose that desire, and find a new way of life. Sometimes that's the best part of the day. And I constantly talk about the drug get high. Like no matter what drug you take, you're only going to get but so high. But in recovery, you can hit a zone called the recovery high. And once you hit that recovery high, you don't want to go back to the drug high. Now, the good news about the recovery high is it can be as simple as being in a group, sharing some experience, strength, and hope. And boom, you know, it's, oh my God, this is just incredible. You know, the spirit from within is revealed and you can really feel, you know, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm a human being on earth. I'm so glad I stayed clean. I'm so glad I chased my recovery. I'm so glad I get to suit up and show up and do these wonderful things. Somebody the other day was in a terrible pickle. You know, shortly after Christmas, their life is crumbling. They have this great career, you know, and they got themselves in a situation where they have to take time away from their career, their family, and go get their head right. And I'm trying to explain to this person, I said, you have no idea. Every Tuesday night, depending on which facility I'm in, whether it be 15 people or 150 people, I bet money they trade you right now to be in your situation. Think about it. So many people out there are so worse off than we are, even in your situation. you know. So one thing I always ask people to do is just focus. Try to stay focused when we come in here, and you do a great job. This is one of my best groups of the week. Come in here and chat with you guys. So I really appreciate that. As always, I can't thank the sheriff enough in Henrico County for letting us come in these facilities and do what we do. And I like to remind folks all the time, if you're watching this and you know people in the corrections industry, whether it be a jail or prison, it's not that hard to find folks like us to come in and do what we do. And the value is incredible. But I often wonder, why aren't more facilities doing this? So once again, I want to remind you, this is a special situation. We have a special sheriff, special open-mindedness, good correctional officers. We appreciate them making this happen. So we can't be grateful enough for that. Our speaker tonight, because I know you're all excited about our speaker, right? He quite the guy. He spoke at East last week. He did such a great job. We said, we got to get you over at West. Now, when I met the fella, I'm thinking, he does talk a lot. And he's a great talker, by the way. And I always enjoy listening to him talk. I have yet to get tired of listening to this fella talk. But I noticed along the way, he had a tendency to embellish in some areas, especially his golf game, right? He tried to tell me he was, better than he was. And I said, well, what's your handicap? And if you don't play golf much, you really don't know what I'm talking about. But he says, I'm a scratch golfer. That means you're at a professional level, right? So when I got him out on the course, and I'm a bad golfer, I'm a terrible golfer. If I break 100, I'm doing good. Well, I beat him pretty bad that day. And I got to thinking, what's your definition of a scratch golfer? Oh, I make a par every now and then. I said, well, that ain't the true definition of a scratch golfer. Don't go around telling anybody you're a scratch golfer, okay? If they ask, tell them you suck, okay? And that would be more to the truth. But, he started playing a little bit more, and so he is a pretty good golfer, and he can beat me now, but he ain't never been a scratch golfer, and he ain't never going to be a scratch golfer. I can assure you that. But you'll notice he's got a little limp, and in case he forgets to tell you why he limps, because he overdosed one time too many, and he passed out on his leg, and he lost his leg. So he's really lucky to be able to even limp up here and give a talk. So we embrace that limp, you know what I mean? Now, if he would listen to me on physical training, I could have that limp disappear. But he don't want to do the work. So I think he enjoys the limp. I think he thinks the ladies thinks it's sexy. I ain't figured that out yet. So y'all help him out toward the end and say, you better listen to John if you want to get rid of that limp. But back to when he talks, he has a tremendous amount of experience with active addiction and even in recovery. So he's really worth listening to. And he's got a wonderful mind. And I'm so honored to have met the gentleman and spent some time with him. We went on a road trip together to Arkansas. We spent a whole week together driving to Arkansas. We went the whole state. We went north, south, east, west to all four borders. We're on a mission to identify 10 sober houses. Well, we have a recovery center in Jonesboro. Not ours, but there's a recovery center. But we can talk about that later. I don't fall victim of an individual hijacking the meeting. I'm the facilitator and he's the speaker. And but I know how y'all act sometimes, man. But anyways, oh yeah, like I said, Marshall can't make it, but he may be tuning in. So let's say hi to Marshall in case he's tuning in. There you go. Brenda, I know he should stay home, and that's good that you allowed him to stay home tonight. We appreciate that. Be safe. And but thank you, Brenda, for letting him watch tonight. So we appreciate that too. But without any further ado, how about a warm Henrico West welcome for Olav, our speaker. Better walk with some strut in there, boy.
Can you hear me, Steve? All right. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing? Good. My name is Olav. I'm a grateful recovering addict. I work at the McShin Foundation. The state certified me to be a certified peer recovery specialist. I'm also a recovery coach, and I oversee one of the houses. There's 16 of them at McShin, so I oversee one of the houses. So I'm honored and blessed to be here tonight to be able to give a talk to you guys. I go into the jails. I'm part of the reentry specialist team at McShin. So I go to RSW in Front Royal and conduct groups for the men's and the female pods in there. And so that's like probably the coolest part about my job. Been incarcerated 2 times in prison, been in jail more times than I can ever count, done years in jail too, before as I was waiting to go to prison. So having the story kind of come full circle and being able to come and give back, to work in the jails, to come to talk with you guys, whenever I get asked to do it, I feel like it's a pleasure and an honor. So thank you all for having me, right? I think John's introduction was sweet. He is not that bad of a golfer, I don't know. Don't let him kid you. He is pretty good, but I certainly was not very good when I first started playing with him. I'd played before, but I was like healing from an injury. I don't know if I was ever truly a scratch golfer, but it was maybe a little bit of an exaggeration. But I really just, how us addicts are great at manipulating the situation. I knew if I said something like that, he'd want to prove me wrong. So that could get me in the car to ride to go play with John. So thank you for that introduction, John. So telling my story, and I get caught up in my story. What I mean by that is telling the story is like a good chance for me to kind of reflect on it as I share it with people, because I used to be scared. I never used to like to tell my story. I would listen to other people's story. I would tell somebody my situation, my story one-on-one, but never the whole part of it. And I don't think I ever can tell my whole story because I'm 38. Spent ever since I was 12 years old ripping and running. So I can't ever just encompass the whole story, right? Especially not in these settings. I tried last week and John had to come pull the mic from me. And he was like, all right, they got to go back to their cells. So, and I was just getting started with the story part of it. So, but to give you all a little background, I was born and raised in Madagascar, a small island in the Indian Ocean, one of the 56 countries in Africa. So that's where I was raised. That's where my values come from. That's where my ideals come from. That's part of who I am, right? And for the longest time, I moved to America when I was 12. Couldn't speak English, right? All day long. I mean, I could speak a little English, but I couldn't really read. I couldn't write. So I'm doing all right now, right? Y'all understand what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay, so far. All right, let me know if I just go off in another language. But no, so it was Malagasy all day when I was at home, right? The African language in Madagascar. And then it was French. My parents sent me to a French school because the French schools there were a lot better than, there was, I think, one American school, but it was like 2 people in the class, right? For like almost each grade. And my parents were like, it'd be better off if you actually had some classmates and stuff. So the French schools were a little bit bigger. Alors, je peux parler français, très bien. I could do this whole talk in French because that was like the language my school was all in, right? English was like spoken every once in a while at home. And my parents were Norwegian originally. So, I can snakke norsk. I speak 5 languages, right? I learned Spanish in prison, all my years in prison. That's where my Spanish got good. So we could do that too one of these days, maybe. If I get that chance where I could speak to some people, maybe in their language, right? Because I feel like I could reach more people that way. But so I grew up in Madagascar, and when I moved to America, this is part of like how I guess my drug story began, right? I think like when someone asked me the other day, they said, "What does the word recovery mean to you?" Right? I think recovery to me is like obviously the word to recover, to find something that I once had that I lost. And most of us lose those things. They say that a lot of our addiction problems come from a part of trauma that we had, right? And that's like a big word that they throw around now, trauma. And people don't really understand so much what trauma is. Like if you go see a movie and you didn't like it, they'll say something like, "Oh, that movie was, it was traumatic to have to watch it." Well, I mean, like that's not really what trauma is, because trauma is not the actual event of something bad that happened to you. Trauma is how that event lives on inside of you, you know? So like, say, for example, if someone were to walk up and step on my shoes, and because I was in an abusive family, not that I was, but say if I came from an abusive household and I was raised in that, and someone stepped on my shoe and I didn't want to say anything, that's, and not wanting to speak up to say, hey, you just stepped on my shoe, you know what I mean? And show them like the power that I hold, because all of us have that power, right? That would be like an effect of the trauma in me, you know, basically not learning to speak up because of the way I was taught as a young kid. So the way I was, I guess we could say, traumatized a little bit was moving to America, not really being able to speak the language like most Americans, having to learn how to read, being in what used to be called ESL, now it's ESOL, right? English is another language, because most people who come from another country speak more than one language. And so like I never really fit in. I couldn't really connect with people on the level that some other people did, because I wasn't from America, you know? I didn't speak their languages. And so like their cultures and their ideals and what was normal to them was not normal to me, you know? And so I started smoking weed when I was 12 years old. My older sister got me to smoke some weed, and I say got me. She offered it to me, and because, you know, I looked up to my older sister, I smoked some weed because I figured if she did it, you know, it wouldn't be that bad. You know, I'm thinking my older sister knows what to do. She's now, you know, she went to Princeton and is a doctorate in theology, and she's a pastor nowadays in Vancouver, Canada. So she obviously didn't go down the path I went. So, I mean, it's not like that little weed. It's hard to argue that little bit of weed is what caused, you know, me to do what I did. But, you know, regardless of how it happened, my parents moved from New York, where we were living, to Norway in Northern Europe. And that was like a whole nother change up for me, right? There was another language with other cultures. Even though I'd had some Norwegian when I was growing up, it wasn't really a part of my circle of stuff that I understood. Whole new ideals. And so one of the things that they do in Norway, which is kind of cool. Here's Travis now. He's trying to come back in. Maybe y'all can hear a little bit from him. What they do in Norway when you're a senior in high school is they do this thing called Rus, R-U-S-S. And the idea of Rus is that as a high school senior, you kind of get a chance for about a month and a half towards the end of your senior year to kind of break a whole bunch of laws, right? It's like a purge situation. If y'all know what the Purge was like, that movie. And so when I say break a bunch of laws, there's like a phone book, a New York phone book size thick of different dares and different accomplishments you can do when you're a high school senior, so that you can get a chance to get a free education to go to university. So they take it pretty serious. And in my head, I was like, all right, when Roos comes around, I'm going to be the baddest at this thing. I'm going to really run amok in the city. Like some people, they'll get like a van, and it becomes the Roos van, and they'll go around and, you know, run amok in the city. I mean, like they kidnap people, you know, and that's all legal if you're doing Roos at this time. And it gets really wild. You can go up to an officer of the law and start making out with them. You know what I mean? Things like that. Some people are running around the streets naked. You know, they're camping out in, you know, roundabouts and stuff like that. And if you go to school during that time, you don't have to go to school, but some people do. Like my sister, when she was doing her Roos, she actually went to class because, you know, she wanted to get into Princeton. But like people will show up butt naked to school. And even if you're not doing Roos, like there's still naked people walking around the halls. So it's a whole nother culture in Norway in that way. And so I really was getting excited about this opportunity that I was going to get, right? And so I started to dive a little bit more into other drugs when I was in Norway. But then my parents moved out of Norway because of, you know, some mistake I made where I was with a bunch of my friends, and we started vandalizing the cemetery, and there was like, I don't know, maybe 100 or so gravestones, maybe more, that got tipped over. And it was just like a drunken night where people started doing it. And I wasn't the one tipping over gravestones, but like I sat there and watched it. So I was just as, you know, part of the problem, right? I didn't stop them. I was a little bit uncomfortable to speak up. I would have, I don't know, I hope I would have do that. I would do that today. But so they moved me out of there because I was facing some, like, it was the first time I went to jail. And it was going to be like a 10-year sentence. And if you know anything about the court systems in Norway, it's like those, you ever seen those Revolutionary War movies where you have like, when you see the judge, there's like 3 different judges that stand up there, and these old white guys with white wigs that are wearing these things. And I didn't want the outcome to be down to these 3 white guys with wigs on. I was scared of having one judge, let alone 3. So my parents moved out of Norway because it was like, a situation. If we left the country, they couldn't extradite me back to Norway for this charge. So we moved to North Carolina. And in North Carolina, I started doing more drugs, right? I kept getting into that sort of culture, like trying to fit in with people, trying to kind of lose my sort of, or find my identity, right? Which in actuality really lost my identity in a lot of ways. But my father was into lobbyism at that place in time when he was in North Carolina. And he got like some bill passed where they removed lottery from the state of North Carolina. So he was good at his job. So they moved him up to Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., where he lived, or like where my parents moved, the next door neighbor of my parents was like this guy who was the head of research and development for ExxonMobil worldwide, right? So he was the big R&D guy for Exxon, pretty big gas company, right? So his daughter was a professional, like a famous movie actress. And so I didn't know she was a movie actress, but naturally she's the cute girl next door. Have y'all ever seen The Patriot? She's that little girl, Mel Gibson's daughter in The Patriot, who doesn't speak the whole movie until Mel Gibson comes back. And then she's like, she says her first word. She's like, "Daddy, don't go," right? Back to war. She was in a lot of other things. She was in Don't Say a Word, Michael Douglas's daughter. She was like a child actress. So it's not like I saw her and I was like, oh, there's that person, right? I knew her for like a few years before I ever knew she was an actress. But we started dating and she moved me out to California. She went out to California for her job, basically. And I was dating her, so I wanted to go, right? Free trip to LA. Why not take it, you know? So I went out to LA and, you know, it was really just like a weed thing for the most part. I dabbled in other things, but like the weed was the main thing for me. And she got me involved with some people that were running this like grow house right out there and like right next to Chino Prison in like Corona, California. So it was San Bernardino County. And I would go out there and hang out with these guys who had this grow house. And it just, you know, me loving weed and like the whole horticulture process, I was like, let me see how this is run. And it was a neat little operation. I remember when this guy first showed it to me, this guy, Daniel, he was like, all right, come out here. We're going to show it to you. But it was real hush hush about the whole thing. I was like, all right. So we went out to this like warehouse and there was like the studio on the first floor that was like one of those Olin Mills, like they snap your family picture. You could go there for prom pictures and stuff. And I'm like, okay, where's this grow studio? Like, this is a pretty big operation. It was a big building, but I didn't know how much of it they actually had. And if you're looking at just the front part of it where like the photos are taken, it looks small. So he asked me to go upstairs. So we go upstairs and then I'm looking down this hallway. There's just a few offices and there's no furniture in the office, right? Like, what's this guy trying to show me? And we finally get to the end and there was like a little closet and he was like, all right, I want you to go in there. Now, I was just new to the West Coast and maybe they're a little more liberal out there with their sexuality or something. I thought this guy was trying to like come on to me. He was like, just step into this closet. And I was like, I told him, I'm like, look, not that there's anything wrong with that. Let me just make that clear. If that's your pathway or your choice, that's cool. But it was not mine personally. So I was like, look, man, I'm not getting into this closet with you because I can kind of see the four corners and I don't know what we're both going to be doing in there. He's like, man, look, I'm going to show you. So before I got in the closet, he showed me there was like a little trap door and he moves the door around. And then sure enough, there was like a catwalk that I couldn't see till I saw that thing move. Then I walked in there. I was like, all right, we can check this thing out, you know? So once I got in the closet, you know, no pun intended, I walked through this catwalk and then I was able to see that we were walking over the entire other portion of the warehouse where there was like 6 different grow rooms and there was like a dry room. I don't want to get into all that stuff, but the point is it was a whole operation that I didn't really understand at the time. And they were doing all kinds of other dirty stuff where they were doctor shopping and they had people coming in. They were shipping all that stuff all over the country. So me being enticed to the glitz and glamour of that Hollywood life and like, you know, the other side of the story where like the whole drug scene that was coming together, I'm like, let me dive into this. So like, I see that there's still some work that needs to be done in this warehouse. And I'm like, I'm not bad at swinging a hammer. I'm a scratch golfer, right? I didn't really know much, but I'm like, here, I can do all this. I really just wanted to get up in there, right? So I wanted to be around the people that were doing this. And I got close with my boy, Daniel. So I'm helping them build stuff. And like one day we were trying to build another level onto this because it was like 4 or 5 stories, but it was like just layered on top of it. And so I was on the second story which was like a whole nother wing with other grow rooms. And each room had different strains of marijuana growing. And I was trying to get up to the second level from like a little bootleg ladder that we had made. And I remember I was carrying like some Bud Light or in like a 24 pack of water. And as I was going up the ladder, I fell backwards, right? Because like the water ripped or the Bud Light, something, and I didn't want to drop either of them. But so I fell backwards and I landed on my tailbone on this cement floor, like 2 stories up. And I remember laying there on the floor and I could hear them, like my buddies that are ahead, they're looking down and they're like, I think he's dead. And I'm alive, right? But I'm sitting there like sore, but I haven't moved because I've just been shocked by the fall. And I was maybe a little high at the time, right? So I'm sitting there thinking, no, you mother effers, you know, like I'm fine. Like, because like they were like thinking, like, what do we do? Like, do we call 911? Because they weren't about to call, because at that point in time in LA, you had to have like a live stream to the police station if you had a grow. So it was an illegal warehouse. So I kind of knew they weren't going to call, you know, for some sort of ambulance for me. And they were like trying to decide like, well, can he fit in the back of your car? Like now I'm thinking like, okay, let me get up because my body might be left in the desert somewhere. So I hop up and I'm like, no, I'm fine. But really I had a concussion and I had a bad tailbone that was like, you know, had a chip in it, right? I thought it was broken, but at the time I felt like I was fine. Somehow I made it home that night. But the next morning, my buddy Daniel calls Sky, my ex-fiance, and he was like, hey, I want you to have Olav go to Fountain Valley in Orange County, and you're going to go see this doctor. His name is Victor Sue, and he's got an appointment at like 1 o'clock. You got to get him there, you know? So we go out there, and I'm thinking, okay, this is just a regular doctor's visit, right? And so my buddy texts me before I go in there. He's like, hey, look, he's going to prescribe you something for your pain because I'm pretty sure you were messed up yesterday. And I'm like, well, I've never seen a doctor for pain. So I go in there, and I'm thinking, like, I kind of had enough sense to say, like, if I make this pain seem a lot more, maybe I'll get more of these pills, right, for the pain. So I go in there, and I remember there was a guy ahead of me, and he was like, I could hear, like, this office was so thin, the paper walls, right? I could hear the entire conversation that the doctor and the other guy was having. And I guess he was getting like some weed prescribed to him or something. And like the guy was like, yeah, I just like the way the weed makes me feel. And then, you know, I'm like, listen, like, why should I shouldn't be able to hear what they're talking about. But I go in there next, right? And so he's like, well, so he starts writing on the pad what he's going to give me before it's even happened. And for whatever reason, my mind goes to some lie. And so I'm sitting there telling him that I was in Iraq and I was on the top of a turret gunner. And I was like, you know, traumatized, and my neck was all messed up from that. Not even getting to the point that I had messed up my tail. I'm just bullshitting the guy, right? And before I could even finish talking, he's like, yeah, I don't really care about all that. He's like, here, this is your prescription. I'll see you next month. And so I look at him, and it was like a huge prescription. There's like 180 Norcos, 240 Roxycontins, 90 Xanax. And it's like, I've never really had a prescription to pain pills. And I don't even think my prescription needed to be anywhere as hardcore as that. Like if I remember taking the medicine, and I should have known something when I went to every single pharmacy around that, you know, actual plaza, and not being able to fill my prescription. Like his DEA number was flagged, right? So it was a difficult time just filling the prescription, but I just thought that was normal because every pharmacist was like, no, we ain't touching all that. So eventually I got it filled. And so like that's how I got hooked on pain pills. That's how I got hooked on opiates. Was from a doctor. And so going back to my story from being from Madagascar, well, if you ever got, you know, in a sub-Saharan, like tropical island like Madagascar, there's like malaria, there's like typhoid, you get all kinds of like wild stuff that you would never see in America, right? And so if you ever got prescriptions like antibiotics, like there was a procedure you had to take, y'all probably know this, like you go through your whole antibiotic. You don't just take a few pills, and then if you want to take some more later, you can't. No, you take the prescription as prescribed. So I'm popping all these pills as prescribed, and it was a lot. Like I couldn't really move, I couldn't really function, I wasn't doing much. So that was something that, like, when I'd call home, my parents were living in Cheverly, Maryland at the time, and I would call home to my parents, and they would try to talk to me, and they'd be like, we don't even understand what you're doing out there. Like, you're not even speaking English most, because I'm all, I'm bar-tarded, like talking to these people on Xanax and Oxycontins and Norcos and that whole time smoking and thinking that like this was all right, because my body started to develop a tolerance to it. Even though that was a lot of medication, when I moved back to the East Coast, because they were like, why don't you come home and we can get you some help, right? And I remember talking to my ex-fiance, who's no longer with us. She's passed away. She started shooting up, her addiction with, heroin and stuff and opiates. She started shooting up. And I remember telling her one day, I said, if you don't stop using it, because in my head, I was doing the right thing, right? This is my delusional thinking. By me just taking these prescription pills, even though like it was a quack doctor, I'm not really like doing anything wrong. I'm not breaking the law. There's nothing wrong with me. She's got the problem, right? It's real easy to find problems in other people. Even today, it's harder to look at my own problems, right? So I remember telling her, if you don't stop using that needle, I can't mess with you anymore. Like, because like the money and all that stuff, because she was a multi-million. I never had to work another day in my life, but it didn't really matter to me, because like there was something in my soul that was like, this ain't not just what she was doing, but like the fact that like that's not really how my parents raised me, And so I told her, like, you got to choose that needle, or you got to choose me. And I wish to this day, because she's no longer here, I can't do anything about it. I wish I hadn't made that, or tell her, or asked her to make that choice, because nobody who's using a needle, who's ever on a drug, like, is choosing, the person that they're affecting. Like they're hooked onto that sort of feeling, and it's not a choice you can ask somebody to make, to choose something like that. Because basically I was asking her, like, do you not either choose to feel normal or choose me? And, before it was even possible for her to make that decision, I left, because it was like, I could tell that she wasn't in it really like that. She was hooked on the drugs, as was I, but to me, that wasn't really clear yet. So I went back to the East Coast to be with my parents. And I remember going to these doctors, and I'd bring my bottles in of all these different medications, and I'd show the doctor, hey, look, this is what I need. I was telling the doctor what he should be prescribing me, because I knew a lot better than him. This is what I need, and if you prescribe that to me, I'll be fine. Well, they were like, no, there's no way we were going to prescribe you all these medications. Like, this is just way too much. So I ended up not getting my prescription. So naturally, I went on to doing heroin and finding it on the street. I honestly, if there was still some heroin out there, like, because I enjoyed that feeling. It's a blessing to me that it's gone into all that fentanyl and stuff today, because it's like a real easy choice for me to stay sober, because it's like, if I go do the drug I want to do, I'm going to die, because there is no more heroin. Like, that stuff's gone. Everything's fentanyl these days. And so like, that's one of those things that like, I can't really help the way that the world and the drug game has shaped up, but it's kind of been like a good kick in my ass to say, like, okay, this is maybe not what you should be doing, because you're not going to be here very long if you do. So we can flash forward a little bit through me going on the streets and running and gunning and not doing the right thing. And I was down in South Carolina, and I had a buddy. He was doing these credit card fraud stuff. Some of y'all probably know somebody who's done that before, right? And we were staying at these really nice hotels, and just living a dirty life, right? Like, we were just doing drugs, but it was in these nice establishments. And I remember I was at this hotel in Kiowa Island, South Carolina. I think it was called like the Estuary or something like that. It's like a really nice hotel. It was like, my buddy was doing the credit card fraud. He got us a stay for like a week in the presidential suite of this hotel. And it's like, I want to say $5,000 a night for this room, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, dude, like, if you're doing credit card fraud, like, isn't the idea of it to not be so obvious? Why are you getting a room in the presidential suite? Like, that just sounds like the stupidest idea. But because that's how I was living and he was doing it, I was like, all right, it's a free place to stay. So the rooms came with these little cards. They were like kind of like a black card where you can go down to the gift shop and you could swipe things, right? And get whatever you wanted out of the gift shop, charge it to the room. And so like I was going down there, and I remember I got this like $3,000 ostrich. It was like a white ostrich belt that I bought out of their little shop. I never would have bought that myself, right? So I had this belt, and I didn't want to take it off because it was this gorgeous ostrich belt. And a couple of weeks later, after we left that hotel, I remember I was in this like seedy Motel 6 or something, and there was someone in the corner who was pregnant, right? She was about maybe 8.5 months pregnant, and she's shooting up, right, a needle into like her stomach where the baby is. And I'm high, I'm like nodded out, right? And there was another woman in there, and she was like smoking some crack, and she was also shooting up. And then she was like, doing some fentanyl. And so they were like both nodded out. And out of nowhere, like I remember I like got up and this belt broke. This $3,000 ostrich belt broke. And, and I started complaining, and I was like, dude, can you believe this belt? $3,000, and this thing just broke. Like it was like and I'm looking around to get some sort of reaction from these two people, these two ladies. The one girl was there, and she was nodded out, right, with this 8-month child about to like literally come out of her belly any second. It's a shocking that it didn't, and I don't think that baby came out alive whenever it did. But like I'm looking around the room for some sort of justification so that someone could feel the anger right now that I felt because my $3,000 belt that I didn't even pay for, that someone else's credit card paid for, in a room that I never should have been in, right? Busted, and they're all just nodded out like, damn, that sucks. Not really getting the reaction I was hoping for. And my phone called, and so I pick up the phone, and there was this kid named Ian. And I remember talking to him, and he was like, hey, what's up, Olav? He'd just gotten out of a rehab. I met him at a rehab a couple months, maybe 6 months earlier. And I was like a leader in the community at that rehab. I was doing all the right things. And he was talking to me. He's like, hey, look, I'm out. I'm not where I was. So can we link up? Let's hang out. And I remember like thinking to myself, okay, well, yeah, I just can't take my car right now. And he was like, what do you mean you can't drive your car to come meet me? And see, my dope man had my car. I'd lend it to him so that I could get some free dope for the night, right? If he just drove the car and made some sales, he'd give me some free drugs, right? So I was trying to explain that to him without, this is like one of my sober friends. So I don't want to tell him, hey, it was my dope man, so really no telling what time he's going to come back. It could be tomorrow, it could be a week from now. I just know I'll get taken care of when he comes back, but I can't tell this to him, right? So I'm trying to tell him like, well, I just can't drive anywhere. And he was like, all right, well, I'll come to you. I'm at the seedy Motel 6 with a broken, ostrich belt. Like I'm thinking, and I don't think I'd showered for like 3 or 4 days. And like that really mattered. This belt that has nothing to do with the person I am, or like, you know what I mean? Like my understanding of life was so warped in that moment. And I was trying to explain this to him. And basically he was like, man, look, because he could tell, right? When you're an addict yourself, you can tell, right? And he was like, look, man, if you need some help, just reach out. And I remember like thinking to myself, help? What the hell you? And now I feel like he's attacking me. What you mean help? I don't need any help. I got this $3,000 belt on right now. Thinking to myself, it might be broken, but we can figure out how to fix it, And so I'm like, I don't know what you mean, man. He was like, look, man, I know you. Like we spent like 6 months together in a rehab in like close quarters. So I know the guy really well. He was like, man, I thought you'd be running a business or taking over the world. Like, I just had high hopes for you, man. Like, the fact that you're out there using right now, that shit breaks my heart. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, hell, he doesn't know me, even though he did pretty well, right? And these two, like the lady who had like maybe we'll say 9 months old, whatever. It was the baby was about to come out. She was nodded out. She opens her eyes and she goes, wow, he had some really nice things to say about you. That person must really be your friend. And as I wanted to be like, motherfucker, you don't know me. This lady who hadn't paid attention to my belt busting at all cared more about what this person was saying about me, who at the time I didn't think he knew what he was saying, right? And then it sunk in for a second. And I was like, wow, you know what? Maybe this guy isn't trying to attack me or come at my character. Maybe he saw something in me that I just can't see in myself right now because I'm too busy getting high, And so I got off the phone with him, and, I didn't say thank you or nothing. I hung up the phone. I'm like, oh, bitch, like, I don't know what's wrong with him. And here's the wild part about the story. So I called some friends, and I got some help that day. And when I got taken back to that same rehab where I met Ian at, right, this was not 3 or 4 days later. Like, literally, where my friends came and picked me up from that motel, I kind of went through my withdrawal a little bit. Then they took me up to this place in Greenwood, South Carolina. And the very first thing that the community said, who knew me there, that I'd spent so much time there, and they were like, hey, man, it's so nice to see you, Olav. Like, this is wild that you made it back. some people don't make it back here. And I was like, yeah, you know, and they were like, hey, do you know Ian? And I was like, yeah. I just talked to Ian like 3 or 4 days ago. They were like, yeah, man, he just overdosed and died. And I was like, no, that's not the same Ian, man. That can't be the same person that we're talking about. And it was the same kid, you know? And it's wild to me because, you know, if it wasn't for that phone call that day, you know, it wouldn't have been something that I thought maybe I should take a look at myself, you know? And clearly, you know, you don't know the effect that me being someone that he looked up to who was getting high, that he got off the phone and that exchange of conversation wasn't something that he was like, well, shit, if Olav's getting high and he was someone that like I respected and looked up to, shit, I might as well get high too, because he died 3 days later. So whatever the exchange of thoughts were in his mind, you know, it hit me deep. It hit me real deep. So, you know, these drugs out here are killing people, man. And, you know, that's the point of the story is that, you know, me coming in here, I'm trying to just give y'all some hope, because you never know when you get high if that's going to be the next one, and you also just don't understand how important it is for you to do the right thing, no matter what you do in life, you know, because our impacts on everybody we know, not just those closest around us, man, to everybody who knows us is powerful. It's way more powerful than you realize. You know, I remember being in one of John's groups one day, and he was like, he always does this thing where after everyone listens to the group, you know, he makes us all stand up, and until everyone says something that they took out of the group, we can't leave the group, you know. And some people want to smoke cigarettes and they want to leave. And I think that's cool, because I remember you saying something, John, about how we each have a unique ability because of all the shit that we've been through, you know, all the trauma that we had that led us to drugs, and all the stuff that we did in our drug game. Like, you know, that's like our resume for a job that makes us skilled at doing the things that I'm blessed to be able to do today. You know, and that's that sort of that power from, you know, might not have all these great jobs in your past. Well, if you've got years of doing drugs, you are perfectly qualified to be in this field, to be able to carry that message, to be able to give some inspiration, some hope to people who don't have, you know, who don't think that anybody can relate to them, who doesn't know, they don't know my story, that attitude. Because I used to be me. I used to sit in those chairs and I'd say, man, don't nobody know what I've been through, you know. And it was real easy to make that sort of assessment before I even really tried to get to know people. And the thing that's beautiful about NA or AA or whatever pathway you have, there are more people who have things in common with you than differences. We share more of those commonalities than we do differences. So I hope you guys got something out of this. I think last time I wanted to, if y'all had some questions, Trav is back in the building. If y'all wanted to see him for a second, or just ask some questions, you know, because last Thursday, I wanted to be able to do like a question and answer thing, so that, because it's not, I'm no different than any one of y'all. I just want y'all to know that. I'm not, the only difference is I stopped using drugs, and that kind of allowed me to not be locked up. Because that's what always put me in these positions, is doing things that are wrong. It's too easy, because even if I wasn't doing the drugs, being associated in that community, being around other people who doing drugs, that put the block hot on me. And all of a sudden now law enforcement are in my grill all the time. I'm getting pulled over, you know, and it's not been that, like, if a cop gets behind me, I breathe easy today. You know, I'm not sitting there thinking, oh gosh, what is he going to pull me for? Let me get, and then I get extra nervous, and then I'm like a bad driver, even if I'm sober. No, I don't do that anymore today, man, because like there's a big difference between being clean and living clean, you know? And so I live clean today, and so I'm happy. It's wild how, like, I don't have bad days. Every single day, like, there might be moments in my day where things aren't great, but I know that's just a moment, you know what I mean? And I just keep it moving, because there are so many good things about what I got going on and what is around me that's beautiful. I feel like it's wild that, and me and Travis were talking about this earlier today, like, that they pay us to do this kind of work, you know, because it's not work for me. This isn't a work job or opportunity for me. This is like how I have to live, because if I don't do this, I'm going to go out there and use, you know. So be able to give something back that was so freely given to me, you know, and to have people so close to me lost, like it gives me that push to do the right thing, because like you never know who I could help and save, man. It's like that's an easier choice today to do good than it is to do bad, man. And because of that, it makes me happier, you know. And it's easy to say, like, okay, I'm in a bad situation right now, I'm locked up, right? But man, I could tell you 100 different reasons that could make your situation a lot worse if you start thinking about how much worse it could get. So no matter what you're going through right now, they can't keep you in here forever. They can't. They got to let you out sooner or later. So like, what are you going to do with that once you get let out? You know, there was a gentleman here when we walked in who was just in that talk that I gave last Thursday, you know, and I hate to say it, but like his attitude was like, now I'm out and guess how I'm going to make my money? And I'm like, I have no idea, you know, because my mind's not in the gutter so much today. I hope you have a plan is what I said. And he was like, well, you know, I don't know. I'm going to go out and I'm going to be jugging. I'm going to be selling some stuff. I'm going to make moves. And I'm like, well, look, I don't know if you like the way that they, you know, the hostages here, like the way they keep y'all, like it's not the Hilton or the Ritz-Carlton. So you keep doing that sort of thing, you're going to come back, man. Like if you're lucky enough and you don't end up shot, dead, you know, or in the ditch somewhere. So, you know, it's, and he sat through and I asked him, I said, what's something that you got out of it? What was something that you got out of that story? And he was like, man, I could tell you still get high. I'm like, what? I'm like, I think what you were seeing was like maybe something that you're feeling inside of yourself and you were trying to look for that flaw, you know, because like I get drug tested at my job. Me and Travis went to was a Bob Dylan show. We got drug tested the next day. You know, right or wrong, that's a good thing that we have that kind of accountability. So like I was like, I promise you, man, I'm not getting high. Like I'm 100% sober. That's on God's truth, man. So if you guys have any questions for me or Trav, thank y'all for letting me share, man. I appreciate it. Come on, Trav.
When he said that, he had an ostrich belt. What? When I heard him say he had a goddamn ostrich belt, all I thought is like the motherfucking road runner tied around his shit. I ain't never seen no fucking ostrich belt. My shit made out of buffalo, but John gave me that shit because my pants don't goddamn stay up. Oh, no cussing, my bad. A little bit, yeah. I'm sorry. I like to turn up. I just drank. I fucking shotgun the Red Bull. That was hype as shit. So so I was thinking about something earlier, like when Olav was talking, he was like, you know, like he wasn't even aware what he was doing, and like as you like move through recovery, like just like John can hear when I'm spitting bullshit, like I can hear when a newer person spitting bullshit. So last night I get a call, like call from somebody I've known. You might as well say all my life, and they're half drunk, and they're like, Trav, I need help. Help me. I was like, shit, you called the right person. He's like, I feel bad having to call and do that. I said, well, what the fuck you think? I'm a resource center. This is what I do. This is what I've chosen to do. Don't feel bad. I mean, feel happy that you called and asked for help. I said, so like I get on my job immediately. I start calling the proper people for this person, trying to fit the perfect place for them. And I do that, and it's like a good conversation. Well, this person's been like an alcoholic all their life. And so the next morning, he probably gets up and thinks, probably feels shame and embarrassment, like, you know, the morning hangover. So like I'm calling him all day, and the person's trying to call him. So now, like I'm getting worried because I ain't heard from him. And he calls me up later in the afternoon, and he says, here comes the bullshit that I heard. But it sounded good because I heard myself in it. He was like, well, look, Trav, I'm going to have to do this on my own. You know, I went to the beach, and I sat at the beach all day, and I had me a goddamn mocha cappuccino. I got it figured out. I'm going to have to do this on my own. I said, God damn, I wish I knew that was the cure for recovery. I would have went to the beach and got me a mocha a long goddamn time ago. I said, now listen to what you're saying. And he walks me back through his last relapse, and he's like, I know step by step what happened. I went down to Florida, and then I got sick, and then my job started messing up. So I had me a drink, and that's where I said, that was the convergence of events that led to your last one. What about the last 50 years? And I said, your idea of recovery isn't what you're thinking. Now listen, if you would have just been like, humbled yourself enough to say, I can't do this on my own. And I know what it is. It's a pride. It's a thing. I don't want to ask for help because I'm a man or I'm a strong woman. And I got a case of that I can figure this shit out on my own. I don't want to ask for help. And that's where humility comes in and just will save your life. Like, I don't got this. And like, this is going to be a weird thing that travels through your head as you get closer to release because you're going to feel good. And you're like, I know it. A case of the I know it's alls. It's a virus, and it'll affect you, and it'll kill your humility, and it'll give you a false pride, and it'll land you right back in this place because you haven't took a look. So I said, listen, man, that convergence of events that you just laid out for me, if you would have just humbled yourself a long time ago, and if you'll do it now, when you get sick and when your job starts going south and when you don't have the answers, you might have a couple tools to combat this shit, them thoughts in your head. You might have a principle or two to walk through. You might even have a network or somebody to call. Just start practicing humility. It'll save your life. I love y'all.
You guys have any questions for Travis or for me or John? No? All right.
Give Olav a hand. You know, Travis hit on something. Because I met Travis, I don't know how many years ago. He came to McKinney, did great. He was doing so good, we went on a road trip together, went up to Pennsylvania. I was speaking at some events, and we got to the event place. I left my hanging bag at the house, so we're out there at them all-night Walmarts or wherever I'm trying to buy a tie and a Coke, because it was that kind of an event. But the point is, man, me and Travis bonded, and Travis came a long ways. I mean, this man's on point. He's doing great. He's saying all the right things. He's been in that jail his whole life. He's been to prison. And, you know, it was so good to be around somebody that was getting it. All right. It's been a few short weeks, relapse. And, you know, that frustrated the hell out of me, you know. And he was in a relapse that involved, you know, somebody died. And I was really angry because the kid that died was a nice kid. And not saying Travis wasn't nice. Make a long story short, Travis goes back to prison, does another year or two or whatever. And then, you know, Jesse brings him back to McShin. And I'm mad at Jesse. I'm angry at Travis. I think he's full of it. You know what I mean? He's just trying to find a hot place to sleep, food to eat. He's not serious because I've seen this before. So, you know, I reluctantly just pay attention. Time goes by, and, you know, Travis had a whole new sense of humility. Did everything we asked him. He sort of lost that razzle dazzle he has about him. You know, I'm a little nervous it's coming back, but anyways, you know, after 6 months, a year, whatever, man, one thing he did different, instead of chasing BS and trying to get back to a place he was probably never at in the first place, he really started chasing helping people. Went out of his way to look after new people, make sure they get where they had to go. You know, just being like a big brother to these kids. And there's two messages here. Message number one, if you spend your time trying to help folks, lift them up instead of so much worried about yourself, you get lifted up. And, you know, Travis, man, now he's a certified peer. You certified peer. He did the training, you know, a couple years going by, and, you know, he's on fire for recovery. And I know, you know, Olav can't tell you. He don't know how to tell this story. I can tell it better than he could. I can tell it to you in 15 minutes. But once again, see, Olav is busting his butt, being a peer support specialist, being a hope dealer, really chasing helping people. And that's the same with those three folks too, you know. Melanie, I don't know. I don't see her all the time, but from what I see, it's good. Steve and Batman, I mean, they busting their butts to really get out of themselves and get into helping people. Now, this is the part that doesn't make sense to an addict. Why would I want to get out of myself and spend my time trying to make a difference in other people's lives? Because there's some magic in that process. The next thing you know, you're getting all your needs met and some. The next thing you know, you're feeling pretty good about your days, you know, like your spirit's coming alive, like all of a sudden I get it. Maybe this is my purpose on earth. And you know, we're not a religious group of people, but we're all spiritual. And you think about it. My specifics were that by the time I found recovery or recovery found me, I was entirely self-centered and selfish. All I could think about basically was getting high and how was I going to do it. And I wasn't particular about bending my morals and values or hurting or offending people. And by sitting still, getting the drugs out of my system, and listening to instructions, and slowly start helping people, and all of a sudden start living that life. Each morning I get up and I always, I dream about women I'll never have, money I'll never make. But when my feet hit the floor, it's always, God, what's your will for me today? And I start chasing what I think the God of my understanding is for my will that day. This is how I roll. And all I know, the days go by, I sleep real good. Me and my wife are very happy. We live comfortably. I got a medical procedure a few weeks ago. And, early in the morning, 6 o'clock, me and my wife are walking, holding hands. I'm in my gown. I'm looking at the paperwork. We're getting ready to go in the back. And I noticed male, 65 years old, Medicare, retired. I'm thinking, holy shit, how did I end up here? I got clean at 23. That's a big hit. I have just lived a full life in recovery, and I do not regret it. And I'm doing the same thing now I did 40 years ago. Go to my few meetings a week. I hang out with my people. I chase my recovery, and it works. That may not sound exciting to y'all, but remember earlier tonight when I said how happy and excited I was and how high I was on life and the spirit to be doing the things I was doing? Life is as good and as simple as that. Now, don't get me wrong. I get to go do some cool things and some nice stuff. I just went on that med cruise, and life is good. We just had a beautiful holiday season, and I had some great moments, some great feelings. But the feeling I can get consistently, is like I'm surrounded by people who are busting their butts because in their minds, they want to be somebody. One, I know I'm already somebody. But two, I know that they're already somebody too. And when you can make that connection to wanting to work hard to be somebody, and when you realize, what the heck, I'm already somebody. That's a wonderful feeling. You people, you're already somebody. I promise you that. Just try to find the person you already are, the good person, and just be that person regularly, and you can't miss. You don't want to risk leaving here, repeating past behaviors. You're going to feel foolish. Some of you might have had some good clean time and you end up here at Henrico again. You feel foolish. You don't have to live like that no more. Recovery really is a simple process, and there's so many venues and opportunities and pathways out there. Search for one that works for you, and when you find it, be fortunate. That can be your story on a daily basis. Man, we love coming up in here. We're so appreciative. We love Henrico. We love our people here. We love the chef. And thank you once again for being focused, taking us all in, because I know you're going to be better for it. I absolutely know that. We will see you in 2 weeks, and I'll try to make sure Marshall comes. Tell Marshall bye. I'm sure he's watching. Bye, Marshall. We love you. See you in 2 weeks. All right. Huh? I can't hear what. Oh, yeah. Country style. Well, that's about $150 order just for this group. I tell Marshall that. Yeah. Hey, baby. Keep up good work.
All right.
Yep.